I'm David Hepworth. Thanks for clicking this Word in Your Ear podcast, videocast, thing for which there is no name. Mark Ellen and I have been creating in this line since 2007. And if any of it has met with your approval, then please click to subscribe because it helps. Leave a comment because we like to hear from you, and maybe even consider becoming a Patreon supporter because then, well, you'll be one of us. Visit patreon.com/wordinyour-ear for details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
Welcome to the Word in Your Ear podcast with me, Mark Ellen, and Alex Gold, who has returned from... Alex, you're back from, where was it? The Alaska?
I was in Alaska for 6 weeks and now I'm back in the Shire. I've returned to Hobbiton gloriously. And it was weird, actually, to have to do things for myself again. Doesn't feel right, Mark.
Well, having spent 6 weeks on a cruise ship playing the part of John Lennon in a band.
I've got to cook my own meals.
You got to
make my own bed.
Laundry.
Laundry. It's mind-boggling. I'm still getting over it, but I'll manage. I will.
You'll manage.
I'll push through.
Look, I was reading a thing about the Oasis Wembley concert, and they always talk about fans flocking to Wembley, and I thought that was an interesting point, because obviously some of those people are fans and they're deep end fans, but some are just people who are kind of vaguely interested and have the money for a ticket and don't want to miss out on the big event. And it made me think, what is the definition of a fan? And it reminded me of a piece we ran at Word magazine. It must have been about 2007 when the Arctic Monkeys had taken off.
Okay.
And Andrew Collins, who was one of our main correspondents, who at the time was 42 years old. Okay. I remember having a conversation with him about how he'd just become besotted with the Arctic Monkeys. And he said, I'm a fan, and he was going around the country, seeing as many of their gigs as he could. He was standing outside the venue waiting for them to arrive like a proper fan. Really? Wow. He did very nervously say hello to Alex Turner when he came out of the gig at the end of one of the gigs. He didn't say who he was. He didn't say, I'm Andrew Collins, I'm a journalist or whatever. Just, he kept it at that level. And he'd just become besotted with them. He'd effectively kind of fallen in love. And I said, well, why don't you write a piece? You're 42 years old. Why don't you write a piece about going out to see them in Europe or whatever? I think they were playing in Paris a week later. And he went out to Paris, followed them out, and did the whole thing. Just, again, queuing up and trying to get a good position at the front. And, and I thought it was really interesting, because what had happened to him was that he'd crossed that line between being really interested in a group and becoming a fan. People say, are you a fan? We've all been fans of certain groups, but not that many. They're just broadly people you're interested in. And I wondered what the definition of fandom was. What do you think?
Well, I feel like you can split music consumers into two broad categories. There are people who are into the music, but the fans are into the people. Yeah. And the music becomes the vessel for that. So there's a sort of veil that you go beyond. Yeah. And then the music is almost a byproduct, because, you care about the bass player. As soon as you start caring about the bass player, you're a fan.
Well, it's a football analogy. There is a football analogy for virtually everything in life, but it's the same, isn't it? You can be interested in a team, but if you're a fan, you can't be a fan by definition without knowing the name of every single person on the pitch. Absolutely. And it's the same. You stop just being interested in the front line of the group, and you become really interested in every single member, and you know who they are, and you know all about them, and you understand the internal dynamic of the way that group works.
They become almost like family, extended family, don't they?
Yeah, they do.
It's a personal investment, and I suppose when you cross the line into fandom, you sort of attach part of your personality to that group. Especially if you're younger, you might change the way you get your hair cut. You might change the way you dress. Change the way you speak. Your worldview will no doubt change to be more in line with the spokesman of the band's particular perspective on life. It's it's something that I think changes you personally and affects you personally, whereas, you know, liking the music is a completely different thing. It's almost a passive thing. You know, the music's there and then it's gone. And
it's buying the merch, isn't it? It's buying the branded stuff. As you say, wanting to... at one stage of my life, I remember wanting to look like the keyboard player of the Grateful Dead and studying the precise denim shirts with the 3 pearl studs on that he used to wear and buying those in a pathetic attempt, you know. Buying Cuban-heeled cowboy boots, wanting to look slightly like a member of the Allman Brothers, you know.
Cuban-heeled cowboy boots?
Wow. I know, it's terrible, isn't it?
I grew sideburns because of Carl Barat of the Libertines. He was my hair hero for a long time. And
that's a good choice.
The luxurious Barnet, absolutely. But these things matter, you know. And like I say, the music is almost a byproduct.
I think you become interested in the failures rather than just the successes. Again, that's like football. If you support a team, then you love the fact that their ups and downs are reflective of the rhythm of life.
Yes.
You know, and you've got to go through the downs to get back to the ups. You know, if you're a band, you've got to make the terrible album in order to reevaluate and reset the clock and think what you're going to do, and from that possibly evolve into something better again, you know. And I think that's something very comforting too about failure.
Well, there's this sense, isn't there, that you're somehow in this with them, and you know, weathering the failures makes the wins even sweeter.
Yeah,
it's almost like a trauma bonding experience. Again, you're so invested. Everything you're doing is parallel somehow to what they're doing, and you're moving through life together in a way you're not with an artist you're just, you know, casually listening to.
Trauma bonding, I like that.
Absolutely,
I've written that. I'm going to be using that a lot. Trauma bonding. But, I remember Chris Heath, journalist Chris Heath, writing a piece for Q magazine about going on the road with the Happy Mondays, and he went to, again, I think it was in France actually, in a coach with a load of Happy Mondays fans. And again, he kind of described them as supporters, because it was like going to an away match. You know, all they did on the way out was grumble about, you know, how you know, the various idiosyncrasies of the group and their foibles and their failings. But obviously loved them. And then all the hilarious things that Bez had done in the past and things that Sean had said. And when they got there, they all agreed on the way back that it had been an absolutely terrible gig. And there was obviously something very comforting about the idea that they'd been out and seen them effectively lose the game, you know. And then at the end he said, well, that's, you know, you're going to go and see the next. Oh, yeah, of course, you know, because you're in the deep end, you know. I think it's fascinating. I'm thinking of groups that I've been a fan of. There aren't that many. The Beatles, obviously, but the Kinks, Free. I can remember being obsessed with Free, the Incredible String Band, the early Fleetwood Mac. I loved the Dead. The Doors. For a stage, I became obsessed with the Doors. These poetic voyagers. They seemed to be the right thing at that stage of my life. The Bob Marley and the Wailers. I was a massive fan, and the Pink Floyd. And I think the last time there's a moment when you kind of stop. You're not capable of that kind of thing because you're just too old to do it. But the last time I think was probably the Smiths. I remember the Smiths coming along, and I must have been about, 28 or something, and becoming really, really kind of involved with them and wanting to know as much as I could about each individual member and where they come from and how they got together and what the songs were about, and just hoping there'd be some news story about them every day. It's funny, and on music papers, I mean, I can remember feeling the sensation of fandom when you're following groups like Stone Roses and R.E.M. and people like that. It wasn't quite, I wasn't a fan, but you connected with them very powerfully through the journalism. But who are the people that who are the ones you've been fans of?
Well, first of all, I feel like the pendulum of fandom sort of stops a little bit when you become older than the people that you're listening to.
Oh, that's good. Yeah,
I feel like for true fans.
So that's good. You can't be a fan. It's like you can't have a hero who's younger than you, can you?
It's all under the same umbrella. I think there's an element of kind of Pied Piperism to it. You know, you can't. Yeah. They have to be a little bit ahead of you, and for you to be able to look up to them in that way and look into them in that way. So for me,
you're making me look ridiculous over the Smiths because, of course, I would have been about 5 years older than any member of the Smiths, and there was I thinking I'm a bit of a fan.
No, but there's always an exception to the rule. There is, and there always will be. But broadly speaking, the last group that I really fell for hard was the Libertines, and that was I was in uni, and And it wasn't.
I know how hard you fell for the Libertines, because the other night they played the Gunnersbury Park Festival, 2 miles from my front door, and they came on stage at 10:30 at night, and we were listening to it. We could hear it really, really clearly. And I went outside and just recorded the sound of the Libertines 2 miles away. And I sent you that file.
You did,
and
yeah.
within 10 seconds, you had identified the song, even though it was this kind of woolly noise. You could even hear a bit of a stage introduction, I think, at one point. But you knew what the song was straight away, didn't you?
I knew exactly where I was in the song, and
Yeah.
But I mean, that was. It was less about the music and more about the story. Again, I think there's a certain romanticism that attaches itself to fandom as well, and.
It's the soap opera of their lives. The music becomes a little soundtrack to that, really.
It's sort of, you become totally invested in it. And I bought one of these, they're military tunics from an army kind of service store in High Wycombe. And I would wear it all the time, thinking I just looked absolutely fantastic. And I stopped wearing it when I was on a night out with some friends in Stratford-upon-Avon, and I was walking home or whatever, and some guy leaned out of his car and shouted, "Toy Town!" Because apparently to the general public, I look like someone from Notting.
That's very humbling, isn't it?
Sound of several balloons popping.
That's right.
But so the Libertines, Oasis, obviously, who I obviously never talk about on here. They got into them in quite a big way. And the Strokes, they're probably the only groups have ever really been a proper. I mean, there were countless groups I really, really loved, like Smiths, Jam, Limitless, but really being invested, because I suppose
it's a relationship. I think my feeling is it's kind of like falling in love. You know what I mean?
It kind of is.
You've lost control of your feelings about this thing.
But the thing about those three groups is they were all happening in real time when I was growing up. So, I'd never attached myself to, for example, the Beatles in the same way. I would say I'm mildly obsessed with them, but I'm not as emotionally invested. No,
it's got to be concurrent, isn't it? It's got to be a developing story.
Yeah.
What's the latest news development, Because that
provides the context for it to be somehow relevant to your life, as it's developing itself. So, but beyond that, that's when it sort of stopped. And I think that's when I sort of started becoming, or started growing older than the people that I was listening to.
That's it.
My relationship.
Your old pal Liam Gallagher, we were talking yesterday about that whole idea of lead singers who are in bands, lead singers who don't play an instrument.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because you had a theory, didn't you, about why lead singers had to, I think a lot of it's to do with the fact that lead singers, a lot of lead singers are legendarily difficult to manage. They're legendarily difficult to deal with. And they seem to be a slightly different species, a slightly different creature from the rest of the people in the group. So give me your theory on that. Okay,
my theory is based on many years of working with many musicians and many, many singers, and sort of taking an aggregate, about what I've experienced. And it's a sort of half-baked theory based on something my friend, another Mark, told me. And it's, so nobody is born knowing how to play a guitar or a piano or whatever. You've got to start from point zero. And there's this long period where you're a bit shit and you know it, and you have to make peace with that and just accept
hard yards. You've got to learn how to do it, haven't you? It's a craft.
You've got to learn about the process and how to be patient with that and yourself. And there's all kinds of, I think, humbling attributes that go along in tandem with learning an instrument, because it has to be that way. Whereas if you're a singer, regardless of whether you go to performance school to study it or whatever, you're sort of either born with a voice or you're not. And so you don't have to spend all that, you can already do the thing and you know it. And so there's not that long period of kind of getting to know yourself.
No, it is true, because you can either sing or you can't, really, to some extent.
Right. Yeah.
And if you or use whatever you've got to turn that into something, some kind of broad entertainment, even if you're not a classically, traditionally good singer. But I mean, yeah, you're born with being able to do it, and so you don't have to put in the craft and the hours, do you, to learn how to do it?
You don't have those formative experiences where you learn how to be patient. You learn how to just trust what's going on and trust that you will be able to do. It's inherently create space for yourself to be more impatient and more anxious. And I suppose, well, also as a singer, your job is to draw attention to you. It's all about you. Whereas,
because if you're the lead singer of a group and you're not playing an instrument, then if people aren't looking at you, you feel you're not doing your job. Liam Gallagher, a very good example, actually, because when there's a guitar solo, he's still doing something distractive, isn't he?
Yeah,
he's still bashing a tambourine or wandering around and pointing at people or doing whatever, just making you look at him. He can't survive without the idea that he's the centre of attention, which is understandable. It's the point.
No, totally. The whole point of Liam Gallagher and what makes him great is that his whole modus operandi is for you to look at Liam Gallagher. But if you're a musician, your modus operandi is to listen to what's going on around you. So there's an inherent awareness of everything else that isn't present in the psychology of a singer naturally, and so they are kind of a different species.
You're saying there's a sense of humility about and a kind of team playing about the other musicians.
Absolutely, and certainly in my experience, that's by and large that's been the case, and I don't think it's any individual's kind of fault, if you like. I think it's just the way people are wired according to what they do choose to do with their life, and musicians tend to be a lot more laid back and outward looking.
But also, I mean, it's complicated because, in so many cases, the singer is 70% of what the group's about. That's what defines the personality. That's the window through which you relate with that group.
Absolutely.
They're the one that's doing most of the press.
It's a trade-off.
They're so therefore they have a right to feel that they are slightly more important. And I think another thing is that they don't have any equipment. If you're a musician, you grow up with that, that thing of having to lug your bass amp up some stairs to some back room in a pub or whatever. If you're the lead singer, then all there is a microphone and a mic stand, and that's been put up for you. And so none of that. It's none of that whole thing of it's very much kind of, I'm here, the show can start.
I've arrived. Proceedings can commence. It's the whole thing's a completely different kind of psychological kind of journey, I think.
But I do think that it's different when they're singers who don't play an instrument. I just scribbled down a few people here that I thought were examples of legendary arses to some extent. Legendarily difficult people who are the singers in groups but they don't play an instrument. Ian Brown, I mean, famously difficult man. Morrissey, Joe Cocker, Marilyn Manson, Paul Rodgers of Free, Siouxsie, actually. I mean, when we talked to Budgie the other day, remember that podcast we did with Budgie? And he was just really interesting about how difficult she was and how she was kind of, I'm here, I'm Siouxsie, I'm being Siouxsie the whole time, look at me, I'm going to soak up all the interest,
If
Janis Joplin, Florence Welch, Gwen Stefani, Mick Hucknall, Richard Ashcroft. I mean, I remember one of his former managers, an old mate of mine. Impossible man to deal with,
Oh, really?
Yeah, Ozzy Osbourne, Michael Stipe too. I mean, completely different species of human being from the rest of REM. But I think the worst offender, I think the man who started this is Jim Morrison. That's my theory. Jim Morrison was the first one who really, really exploited this idea that this group does not exist without me.
Jim Morrison is the reason.
Proven, I have to say, of course, by the fact that after his death it didn't, and it couldn't be resuscitated. But I mean, he just seemed to embody everything that was about the group. He was the kind of poetic, bacchanalian lyric writer, and the way he looked, everything about him. And he became completely overtaken by the concept of his own importance. And I can sort of understand it, really, because, that even the Doors at their absolute peak, people who loved them, there were people who didn't know the names of the rest of the group.
Yeah,
it's entirely about him.
Jim and the band, wasn't it, essentially?
Jim and the band.
You could add John Lydon to that.
John Lydon, yeah, absolutely. John Lydon. Another.
Yeah, it's the theory is it holds weight, doesn't it?
It holds weight. It holds weight. I blame Jim Morrison myself.
Yeah.
So look, the other story that was interesting was one about, which again you know quite a bit about, was being a drummer. Is the whole story of
a recovered drummer.
A recovered drummer. Oh right, you're giving it up. You're trying to.
I take it very seriously. I'll play an instrument now. I'm allowed to make drummer jokes, by the way,
because I think that the kind of reputation of drummers, the image of drummers is changing. Because it used to be the butt of drummer jokes, wasn't it?
Yeah.
What do you call a pretty girl on the arm of a drummer? A tattoo. The old gag.
How do you know if a drum rise is level?
Oh yes, it was something to do with saliva or something.
Yeah,
wasn't
the
it?
drool comes out both sides of the drum.
That's right. No.
I think my favourite one is how do you know one of the drummers at the door?
Go on.
The knock keeps speeding up and he doesn't know when to come in.
Oh, that's really good. Oh, that's a good. The one I remember was, what's the difference between a 12-inch pizza and a drummer? It was a 12-inch pizza can feed a family of 4, which is cruel, isn't it? But I think that this is all changing. There was a news story about, I think it's the Foo Fighters had fired, is it Josh Freese? I think it is, you know.
Yeah.
And he's rejoined Nine Inch Nails, which is quite interesting. And they've hired Ilian Rubin, would that be right, from Nine Inch Nails? And he was the one who replaced Josh Freese when he was fired in 2008. So there's a kind of drum swap. But I thought it was interesting because the value of drummers, again, referring very briefly to your old pals Oasis, if you look at any of those clips of Oasis in these massive venues, what you hear is the vocal, a kind of blur of guitar sounds, and then very clearly you hear the drums. And you realise how crucial the role of the drummer is in the world of stadium rock. You know, Oasis can play stadiums because they've got, Joey Waronker playing drums. Tony McCarroll, God bless him, would that have been possible? I doubt it,
Oh, it couldn't have been done. I mean, can you imagine Meg White playing Wembley?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I saw Meg White playing Glastonbury. I thought she was okay, but then again, she's required to do very little.
But the whole sensibility behind the festival is completely.
Yeah,
different.
it is. It's true.
It's a huge thing, but it's not a stadium show. And
yeah, it's true.
All these drummers, Joey Waronker, Josh Freese,
yeah,
they're basically the world's top session men.
Yeah,
they're so professionally wonderful and they're so highly skilled at what they do. The drums are so important. They underpin everything, and the sound's a lot cleaner in a stadium as well. So it's even more important because there's no room for anybody. There's no room for the drummer to hide in a sweaty little.
Well, that's it, isn't it? Because the bassist can have a slightly bad night, and the rhythm guitarist can make a few fluffs, and they probably wouldn't be noticed. But if a drummer is missing cues, if a drummer is just not getting the fills in, if a drummer loses beat or whatever, it's going to be massively obvious to everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can't take any chances. So it makes sense that Oasis have got Joey in because he's among the best in the world at what he does, and I think what he does as well stylistically is he takes a little bit from all the drummers that Oasis have had and sort of mulches them all into a big pot, and what you've got is the best of all the drummers that have gone through that lineup.
But I think it's kind of like a drummer transfer window, isn't it? It's another football analogy, but I think it's the stadium circuit that's contributing to that because, as you were saying, you cannot play these big venues unless you've got an absolutely brilliant drummer behind you.
Well, the stadium circuit's driven by nostalgia these days, isn't it? And nostalgia is very different to a band coming up because Oasis. Again, to use Oasis as an example, 30 years ago. Their whole shtick was chaos.
Yeah.
So everything was allowed to be a little bit mad and off kilter because that was part of the sell. Whereas nostalgia is all about preserving people's memories about the best bits of what they experienced when they were young.
Yeah.
And for that to happen in a convincing way, it's got to be smooth and slick. The paradigm is completely different. So and because of that, I think that the Keith Moon kind of drummer sensibility is it doesn't exist anymore. I don't think that paradigm doesn't exist at all. Drummers are kind of almost the most reliable member of the band these days.
There was a little quote from Bruce Springsteen about Max Weinberg. He was talking about what a human marvel he was. So he comes out and he plays basically for 3 hours straight without stopping. I think he's 70. Is he 76? Something like that. 76? Wow. I think so. And when he stops, maybe there's 30 seconds where he can get a sip of water, but otherwise he just plays for 3 hours. You think, that is phenomenal, isn't it?
It's an athletic job. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and also that, sets have got longer, 2-3 hours a night.
Yeah.
It's not 45 minutes in a club. It's a feat of endurance, and you've got to be on good physical form for it. Everything's got to work, at the absolute top of its game.
It is pretty much the anniversary of the first really memorable stadium gig, isn't it? Shea Stadium. Mid-August 1965.
Yeah.
And I was, I think I sent you that clip of Sigourney Weaver. It's so brilliant. If you haven't seen it, anyone listening, have a look. Just put in Sigourney Weaver and Beatles, Shay Stadium, whatever. And you get only about, 6 or 7 seconds long. And there she is, looking absolutely identical. She would have been about, 14 or 15 or something like that. And there she is in the crowd screaming. And you can just hear her mouthing the word, John! It just goes, John! It was so good. But I was looking at that gig, and the tickets were $5, which was £2. Which I think is the equivalent of about £43 today. And for that, you got whatever it was. You got Brenda Holloway, King Curtis, Cannibal and the Headhunters, and Sounds Incorporated, and the Beatles. But then again, it sounds kind of cheap, but then you couldn't see them or hear them. There were no screens. So you couldn't see anything. The sound was whatever it was. It was the kind of announcement PA system, so you couldn't have heard anything either.
Do you ever stop and just imagine what a Beatles gig with a modern stadium setup would feel like? Because it's interesting, isn't it? Because they just kind of preempted that whole revolution of audio equipment where you had PAs, and they were essentially using the club PA, weren't they?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Which is bonkers, really. To think that they were completely drowned out by all the people that were there to see them.
So, new Beatles anthology coming out, which you and I have been trying to find out what it consists of. Yeah. And there are 13 unreleased, basically alternate takes. I don't know if there's anything particularly fantastic. There's no new song. Obviously, there's just different versions. There's take 12 of kind of I Want to Hold Your Hand or whatever, which is okay. And of course, I will inevitably finish up listening to this. And there's an extra film made by Peter Jackson of the footage from the mid-90s, But, the Holy Grails still remain, which are Carnival of Light, aren't they? Carnival of Light, as yet, and will never be released, and probably shouldn't be. Because Carnival of Light recorded spontaneously of them playing a kind of drone percussion sound with odd psychedelic noises for an event at the Roundhouse, and played once live and never heard since, apart from by Mark Lewison, would be terribly disappointing, I think, if it came out. But then you'd love to hear it. So that's the Holy Grail, and the full version of Helter Skelter would be fantastic, I think.
If for any fan, it's going to be Catnip, isn't it?
Yeah, it would be.
You'll want to hear all the alternate versions you can. And, you want to go, for me, discovering a new mix of an Oasis B-side, you wouldn't be able to keep me away. Honestly.
Just a new mix?
Yeah, absolutely. I was
not even an unreleased song.
I'm not sure I'd be able to handle an unreleased song.
No, that'd be too much.
But if you're a real fan of these bands, I think that it's all endlessly fascinating. You want to hear what kind of the parallel universe stuff sounds like. It all kind of enriches this kind of this world you've made up that you inhabit.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. But so there's one extra episode of the anthology, isn't it? I still remember watching it when I was in uni on DVD, and Ringo's final words in the last episode, we were just a bunch of lads who loved each other very much.
That's right. It's kind of like Paul's whole thing was, we're just a group and we just got very big.
That's a humble bragging his way through it.
It's kind of terrific false modesty, but it's quite funny.
John and I were just kicking around in the garage and we invented music. It was a good afternoon, yeah.
Then you know what happened? I don't know. We just got enormous. People liked it, and what can I do? Shrugs.
Yeah.
I know. Apology. Oh well. And we will have more on it when we find out more, and we will have heard some of it too.
Indeed.
So there. So look, we've got various things to plug, haven't we? We've done all sorts of recordings recently. One I think we should plug is the Tanita Tikaram thing. It's quite interesting. Tanita Tikaram being the first big hit in the big what was it in the late 80s, I think. Interesting thing about her podcast, I thought, was the fact that she was successful really from her second gig. I think that was amazing. She played some gig, hadn't she, at school? She was still at school at the time. She then got a gig at the Mean Fiddler Acoustic Room, at which various concert promoters and managers were there, and she got signed up by Paul Childs, and almost immediately after that got a record deal. And I was thinking, what a mixed blessing that was. If you're a singer, if you're just effectively a Whitney Houston or a Celine Dion or somebody who's broadly not doing your own material, it doesn't really matter how old you are when you take off. You're a singer and you're a technician. But if you're a singer-songwriter, the important thing is to have things to write about.
The important thing is
I remember
the story,
interviewing
isn't it?
Phil Oakey when he was 26. That was when Human League were really first had their first real success, And he'd left school when he was 18, and he'd worked in all sorts of jobs in a bookshop as a hospital orderly, I can remember. He'd done all sorts of stuff, and therefore was qualified to write songs like Don't You Want Me, which have some element of what
as a doctor
life...
in a hospital
That's right.
ward.
That's good. But he was qualified to kind of to he had a life he could write about, and Neil Tennant was the same. I remember Neil Tennant saying, because he was 31 when he had his first hit, but I can remember him talking at Smash Hits about the fact that he'd lived his whole life. There's a track he put out recently about him coming down to London in the early 70s in his kind of glam rock stack heel boots and his flares and going to clubs and things. Leonard Cohen, 33 years old when he first had any success. He had this whole kind of failed career as a as a novelist, really, and as a poet. Well, not failed, but he hadn't really got anywhere, and he just didn't start writing songs, trying to release songs till he was in his 30s. It's really interesting.
Jarvis was in his 30s, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was.
Finally cracked it.
Yeah.
And their songs are all about rumination and they're all narratives, aren't they?
Yeah, they are.
You can't do that when you're 21. I don't think.
No, they're mostly looking back to the past and wood chip on the wall, and just a world you left behind and making sense of it. No, I thought it was really interesting, and there she is writing Tanita Tikaram, writing these songs. And when you're that successful, age 17, very hard.
A lot of pressure.
Really, yeah, I thought so. And we talked to Bob Mould, and I thought Bob Mould was interesting too. Bob Mould, Husker Du, Sugar, etc. And we both thought, what a sweet, soft-centered, kind, gentle-natured character he was, and how extraordinarily at odds that was with the noise that he makes. He's still doing a solo tour that's electric. It's an electric guitar. He's still, you listen to this Husker Du. I'm not pronouncing right. It's Husker Du, isn't it?
Husker Du, yeah.
Husker Du. If you listen to those, they're aggressive, abrasive songs. This is the band that that really influenced Nirvana and the Pixies. I thought that was interesting. I felt the same thing interviewing Pete Shelley. I can remember interviewing Pete Shelley when the Buzzcocks were pretty huge. I did a little piece about him for NME, and Pete Shelley, again, sweet, soft-natured, lovely chap. All he wanted to talk about was the books he'd been reading on the train down to London, and there was this guy making this quite aggressive, quite combative music, So that was interesting.
I found it really interesting, really impressive that Bob Mould's his own tour manager as well.
There's a bit of that. Well, again, that's to do with the economy of modern touring, isn't it? That any way you can save money. I mean, anybody touring on their own, who could even afford a tour manager now would be. I mean, what a big chunk of your profits that's going to be.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get over there he was. He'd do the shows, then he'd stay behind afterwards, and they would pretty much sell the merchandise, and then he would meet all the people, and then he would sign whatever records they bought, for him, and then he'd go back to the hotel and check on tomorrow's flight and get the cab booked for him. He thought, my God, this is hard work. This is ridiculous, you know. So good luck to him. No, he was great. Any more to plug? I don't know if we have, actually.
Well, we just put out Neil Hannon.
Oh, is that out? Oh, great.
Yeah. And he was. I just find him really comforting to listen to.
He is.
Something really, really very comforting about his manner and, you know, the way he articulates things. I've got to say, at the Indie Disco is one of my favourite songs of all time, ever.
Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it?
Wonderful piece of music. Yeah.
Yeah, he talked about... It's interesting because we did Brett McKenzie not long ago, and what similar worlds they work in, because he was talking, wasn't he, Neil Hannon, about writing songs for movies and for musicals.
Yeah.
And just how difficult that is. We put out a little clip, actually, of Brett McKenzie talking about the commission he got to write a song.
The Minecraft movie.
A Minecraft movie. And I think it's had thousands, tens of thousands of hits, isn't it? It's really popular because it's so interesting. And in a minute, he tells you how he's asked to write a song that they had Holding Out for a Hero was the track in the Minecraft movie, and they'd cut around this already. But they, for some reason, couldn't use it. They couldn't afford it, or it was withdrawn or something. So they're basically asking him to write a song in exactly the same structure, isn't it? It's got to have a lyric along these lines. It's got to be sung by a girl. It's got to have the emphasis, the hi-hat cymbal emphases at exactly the points to tie in with whatever's happening on the screen.
And not too many high mids.
Not too many high mids. That's technical, isn't it?
He says it's a very busy sonic area.
There's
lots of sword fights and things like that. So, you know, those kinds of frequencies.
I love it.
It's amazing.
I learnt a lot. He was really good. So, yeah, all that's out. And all the usual entertainment that we provide. And the quiz on Fridays and all sorts of old podcasts are available on the site. Indeed. And we shall see you next week for another podcast.
Toodaloo.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.